In this lecture, we're going to be learning how to use the transform tool and the different applications you can use it for. So the transform tool is basically when you can take a selection or a whole layer and you can warp it into different shapes or different things like that. So let me show you what I mean. So our first project we're going to do is we're going to take this layer right here, and you can download this file by going to the resources of this lecture. We're going to take this layer right here, which is just of a street that I've cut out. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the perspective on it. Now, this isn't going to be perfect perspective. I mean, really, if we were to adjust it to follow these perspective guidelines out here, we would see more of the underside of this roof and stuff like that. But this isn't necessarily to create perfect perspective. This is for something like, let's say you're creating some concept art and you wanted to just kind of take some of the detail from a photograph and just apply it into your image, and you wanted to just quickly sort of adjust the perspective. This is how you could do it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to grab it, move it over here onto our perspective lines and get it pretty close to it. And as you can see, the perspective is quite off. So what we'll do is we're going to turn on the transform tool. If you're using Photoshop, it's going to be Command T or Control T, but in whatever software you're using, you need to find the tool that will transform your image. So now we have that selection in the transform. So what we can do now is we can resize it. As you can see, I can grab that corner and make it bigger or smaller. I can grab it from here. If I hold down Shift, I can just control the up and down. And if I hold down Shift, I can control the side to side. So I could stretch it out like that if I want. I'm going to go ahead and undo those. But what we want to do is we want to warp this into place. So if I right click my selection, you can see we have all these different options. We have scale, rotate, skew, distort. And so let's go through a few of these just real quick. So if I do rotate, you can see that I can go ahead and click out here in the corner and I can rotate that selection. So that might be useful for whatever you're doing. Let's go down to skew. You can see if I skew it, what it does is it kind of just drags it straight down like this. I can do the same thing with this corner, but I can't really move it from side to side. You can see if I try moving it from side to side, it's only going to skew it up and down or from side to side, but it's going to kind of lock on that either X or Y position. So let's go ahead and undo those. Whoops. So I guess I can only undo back once with this. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it back up into place like that. Let's right click, and now we're going to go ahead and do distort. So what distort does is it allows us to grab one of these points and drag it around wherever we want. So we're not just stuck on an X axis or a Y axis. We can drag it to any point we want, and this is going to allow us to adjust that perspective. So let's go ahead and I'm going to drag this down until this area right here at the bottom of the building is basically touching the bottom of my guideline. And then we'll do the same thing for the top. And as you can see, as I do that, it starts to bring up the bottom part. So you have to continually adjust this as you go. I'm gonna get that roof line to line up just like that. And then get this bottom part to line up. And I'll drag this bottom part back down. And you just keep adjusting until you get it lined up correctly. And I want to make sure that these lines stay pretty straight. And as you can see, it's just something that you really have to work with and slowly adjust it a little bit at a time until it looks pretty good. All right, I think that looks pretty good. I could actually probably straighten this line out a little bit more. All right, great. So that's pretty much in line with that now. So something like this isn't necessarily something you would call art, but you might use this in the background of an environment design or something like that. And using that tool will just allow you to adjust that perspective. All right, let's move on to the next project. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn these two layers off, and I'm gonna turn on my next layer, which is an image of these two crates. And then I have this image that's just Jason Bachelor type of logo I just created. And we're going to skew this into correct perspective so that it actually looks like it's laying in perspective on one of these crates. So let's go ahead and turn on the transform tool. Make sure that you have your layer selected. We'll turn on the transform tool. And I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in here so we can see a little bit better. Let's right click, and we're gonna come back down to distort. Just the same thing we used before, and we can go ahead and start dragging these points to wherever we need them to be. And since this is a box, it makes it very simple to just basically drag this right to where we need it to be. So if we wanted to fill from top to bottom of that crate, we could do that, or we could drag these down a little bit more. We just want to make sure that the edges of our selection, the lines of our selection, stay basically at the same angle as the surrounding lines of this crate. Something like that looks good. Let's go ahead and hit enter. And now that is in correct perspective. So you can take a logo, decals, really anything you want, and put it onto a flat surface. Now, what if we wanted to do something like a round surface like this? So right here, we have an image of some lanterns, and then I also have this little simple illustration I did of a dragon. And what we want to do is we want to take, we want to take this image and we want to wrap it around this sphere shape. So what we'll do is we're going to use a transform tool, which is called the warp tool. So if I zoom in there, let's turn on that transform tool, right click, and we'll come down to warp. And as you can see, it basically creates a grid system on top of it. And this allows you to warp and adjust and curve different aspects of your image. So you can see if we grab right here, we can pull that side that way, and we can pull that in like that and pull that side out like that. So we can do all kinds of crazy things like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo that, start over, because we don't actually want to do that. We'll come back down to warp. And what we want to do is we want to warp this into the curve of this lantern. Now, luckily this lantern has lines coming across it, so it'll make it kind of easy to line up. So what we're going to do is we want to line it up with the same height as this writing right here. So I'm going to drag this point down to right there. So it's lining up with that same line right there. I'm going to drag this point down to right there. And then I'll drag this down like that. And as you can see, you get these little lines with dots on them that you can grab and move around. And that just kind of controls the curve of that line. So I'm going to adjust those until I get that curve right. And then we can go ahead and we can grab these points. I'm going to drag this out so it's lining up with this dark line on the lantern. And you might have to adjust these points out here just to get that curving around correctly. I'm going to drag this down to here, drag that back out. And we want the bottom of this to line up probably somewhere right about there. So we'll actually go between the middle of these two lines. Adjust that curve. And basically we're just trying to mimic the curve of these black lines that are moving around our lantern. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. We have those matched pretty well, but now you can see that the grid inside is not really matching up with the curve of the lantern. So you have to imagine that if there was a grid drawn onto this lantern, you need to kind of create that curve. So first, these all need to be kind of pushed out a little bit more so they have more curve. And as this starts to wrap around the lantern, these outside edges over here are going to get a little bit smaller. So I can move them in like that and like that. And then I'll move that back inwards from the outside a little bit more. I'm going to move this in a little bit more like that and readjust the outside parts. And maybe that's a little bit too much. I'll bring that back just a little bit. And then we also want to make sure that these lines coming across here are also following the curve. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust those so they're following the curve of these black lines on the lantern. Because if we don't get those right, then the image is not going to be warped properly. All right, there we go. So now that grid system is warped around the sphere and it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit enter. And now you can see that that looks like it's kind of more warped around the actual sphere rather than just being a flat image. And it doesn't look as real just because we haven't done things to it to make it look like it's actually laying on the image. If we wanted to, we could go ahead and use an eraser and bring our opacity down to like 10%. We could just slowly kind of erase some of this out, and that would help it look like it's laying on there more. There's a lot more things that we can do, and you'll learn about them later in this course of how we can make that look like it's more laying on that surface. But for now, I just want you to understand the transform tool and the different things you can use it to warp images for. That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.